And now for the scripture for the broadcast, which is Matthew 24, verse 20. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. So here we find ourselves going into the Sabbath or already in the Sabbath, depending on where you're at in the world. And you have the world who is completely, totally against the Most High, because majority of the earth right now is getting turned up and ready for the weekend. What party can I go to? What club can I, get drunk, get high? Uh, you know, all types of wickedness that goes on from Friday to Saturday night. It's the spirit of Babylon. And here we see in prophecy the Messiah speaking about the Sabbath for those who would say that the Sabbath is done away with or that the Sabbath is on Sunday, not knowing that Sunday is a form of sun worship for those who honor that day as their Sabbath. It's pagan, it's Babylonian. So you have the spirit of Babylon at its highest levels during this period of time. This weekend, Friday night to Saturday to Sunday night, the world is backwards. And that's the reason why you see what you see in the earth today with so much chaos and confusion, so much craziness. So the Messiah warned us, gave us a warning on this time to pray that our flight be not in this time, because this is the time the enemy attacks on all levels, physically, mentally, spiritually. Are we taking heed? Are we prepared? Are we preparing ourselves? So for this particular show, we like to go into Bible prophecy so that brothers and sisters who are out there can start the Sabbath off knowing just how evil the days are, how wicked they are, what's going on around them, that we are praying and watching always as commanded by Christ, and not taking the Sabbath for granted, but also realizing that as we're gathered together, as we're resting, this is the time the enemy will come against the true worshipers, those who do understand and see what time it is. And right now we're most definitely in a very, very dark hour in the world, the darkest hour the world has ever seen, in a time of great deception. So much deception in the world right now. So much sorcery being casted on the minds of the masses with everything that you're seeing going on. You have a lot of events that aren't really events at all, aren't really things that are happening at all, but more so just what they're telling us is what it is. Nothing more than words. Nothing more than some exercises or some drills. You have things going on in the earth right now with natural disasters that are being manipulated by the hands of man and technology and that level of sorcery. So we are in a engineered and artificial construct that we think is reality, but a lot of people are so disconnected and so far out of touch with reality, with the demonic forces that have led mankind astray into this alternate realm of reality, of thinking, of understanding. Wanted to come on last week and speak about what was going on at the time, but it was so much happening and it was so new that I didn't want to come on and speak on it until some time had passed so I could really, analyze it and digest it better. And then, of course, things are happening so much more faster now. You have new events unfolding as we speak with what's going on in France, right? But just to speak on the things that are currently happening that are most in most people's minds. the biggest thing I would say most people are dealing with, especially in America, is the what would be perceived to be black men being killed and shot by police, and the police being shot and killed by black men. Now, the reason I say so called or I say perceived is because a lot of things that we're seeing are not real. A lot of the things they're showing us, brothers and sisters, is not really happening. Of course, a lot of us are familiar with false flags. False flag is something that is being staged. That could be a really real event, but it's actually being done purposefully by higher level powers within the governments. That's a false flag. Hitler did a false flag in Germany to bring Germany into World War II. America did a false flag in 9/11. And when I say America, I'm talking about the government. On September 11, 2001, to bring America into a war in the Middle East. And we look at the Middle East today, since then, and things have only escalated to chaotic proportions out of this world in certain parts. Of course, even with that, they show us things in the Middle East that aren't true. Every place in the Middle East is not chaotic, but there are places where people are getting killed, people are dying. Going all the way back to 70 A.D., when before that, when Nero burned Rome and blamed it on the Jews, who were called Christians at that time, to give an excuse for the people to surround their government in support to go and get those Jews that burned our city. And this is what they do. They do these false flags to get the support of their citizens so that they can now bring about their agendas, whether it's passing laws, whether it's causing more fear, more submission. This is what they do. Now, within that realm of false flags, you also have events that are total hoaxes, where nothing is happening at all. When they say people die, nobody's dying. When they say that that this is happening or that's happening, nothing is really happening. And you may have a drill that's going on simultaneously as these events, or you may have drills that happen the day before or the week before, anything along that line. But there are these events that are they're saying happening that aren't happening. Like, let's take for instance, last week you had 2 back-to-back days where you had one brother in Minnesota who they showed, they had actual video footage of this black man's girlfriend doing a live Facebook stream of her boyfriend being shot by the police. And it looked real. But when you start really analyzing things and really looking at it with eyes of discernment, critical thinking, you can easily start to see that something does not look right about what I'm watching. First of all, this man's girlfriend, the black man who's just got shot, she's a little bit too calm for somebody whose boyfriend just got shot. And she's giving this video prime time airing on Facebook. It's just, perfectly, timed out like this, right? And in the midst of the brother being shot, she says, my boyfriend's been killed. And her boyfriend is sitting there breathing. He's not dead. So that's the next thing I'm asking is, why is she saying my boyfriend's been killed right after he's shot and he's still alive, breathing? And she's filming all of this, and the police officer's telling her, keep your hands where I can see him, ma'am. And she's in total compliance. Yes, sir. No hysteria. She's just and being so nice to the officer, and then the officer has backup come, and she gets out the vehicle and still filming, and they're telling her, keep your hands where we can see him, and she's just filming all of this perfectly. until they lay her on the ground. And when I'm watching this, I'm looking at this with just unbiased eyes, and I'm saying to myself that this does not look believable, that this is happening. And a lot of people may say, well, you see blood on the brother, right? And we'll get to that in a moment. But I want to move on to the next incident where now you have the next day in Louisiana, Baton Rouge, another brother who gets shot by police. And it's being filmed by people in a car and filmed by the camera that's on the premises. And the people that are in the car, it's the video is kind of blurry and it's kind of far away, but the other video that is closer to the police, right before the police so-called shoot this black man, the cameraman turns the camera away from the police for about 10 seconds. And then that's where you hear the gunshot, and then that's when the camera goes back to the man, and you see him motionless on his back with blood on his chest. So again, I ask the question is, why did this camera for that brief moment in time veer away from the shooter in this incident and did not catch that actual act? And then as soon as it happened, then all of a sudden it goes back and it's already blood on his chest. You see, these are things that make me scratch my head. And then you have the following day or so, a Black Lives Matter protest, which we know Black Lives Matter is actually funded by George Soros, who is a white man. So you have a black group funded by white elite men. And within this protest, which at first seemed peaceful, you then have a so-called sniper who starts to shoot police, injuring 11 and killing 4 were the first initial reports. And his name is Micah Xavier. So then, of course, the nickname Micah X, as in Malcolm X. And they start showing all these Black Power photos of him with dashikis on, holding up the Black Power fist, pictures with him and Professor Griff holding hands, giving each other dap. And they use a Terminator to go in and bomb and kill this sniper that they say that they tried to plead with for 20 minutes before they sent the Terminator in to get him. And of course, under those circumstances, if a bomb blows somebody up, you pretty much aren't going to be able to show the body because it's been blown to smithereens. But what about the rest of the bodies in these incidences, in these situations? Where are the bodies of the police? Where are the funerals for these so-called victims? Where are the interviews of these policemen that were shot and injured? No, we get interviews of doctors, of nurses talking about how they feel about what happened, who were supposedly working with the injured in this case. And there's so many details that they continue to pour in the midst of these events. My thing is, when it comes to these events, is that I don't believe anything that the government or the government-sponsored news is telling me. When I say government-sponsored news, I'm talking about CNN. I'm talking about Fox News, NBC, CBS, so on and so forth. I don't believe anything they are telling me. because they are forgers of lies. They have lied to us over and over and over again, so why would they tell the truth now? When you look at the word media, it is short for medium, and we've talked about this for those who have followed the show maybe years back, and actually did a show on media and medium, that it is sorcery. A medium is a spirit or a demon. And you look at these particular individuals that they call newscasters. Casting, what are they casting? They're casting spells. They're nothing more than actors whose job is to get on the screen and to give you a script as they read off a teleprompter to convince you with a couple of pictures, a couple of video clips, that these events are real and that they are happening upon hours and hours of rhetoric with no proof, no evidence, just a bunch of words. And people buy it hook, line, and sinker. And not even just those people who believe everything that's been said, but even those who think that people actually are dying, to believe that people actually die in these scenarios. Now, am I saying that black men aren't being killed by police? Absolutely not. But we have been being killed since we got off slave ships and before we even got on them. So that's nothing new. But when it's something that is prime time TV and it's being shown to you like a movie, and it's something that is being showed over and over and over to you and being said to you over and over and over again to you what happened, you are being programmed. If you say a lie enough times, people will believe it. Adolf Hitler even said that. So that's what we're seeing going on right now. We're seeing it happening in Hollywood, and we're seeing it happening in the news. And the media is nothing more than an extension of Hollywood. The media is nothing more than Hollywood, an extension to continue to feed you the programming. Let's see what Hollywood has been showing us lately. Have we not talked about the movies that have been coming out as of recently? Captain America Civil War, X-Men Apocalypse. Now they have out The Purge election year. Even up until what happened yesterday on Bastille Day in France, you had a movie come out almost 2 months to the day of this so-called attack called Bastille Day with Idris Elba. So these aren't coincidences. The people and the masses are being programmed and having spells cast upon them through what we see happening. And you notice how in these movies now, whenever they show a news segment in the movie, it's always corporate government-ran media like CNN. You always see Wolf Blitzer or Anderson Cooper or somebody along those lines in the movies now because these people are actors. Anderson Cooper is an actor. Wolf Blitzer is an actor. That's all they are. They are celebrities now, these newscasters. You have situations like, Hillary email scandal, lies. There is no email scandal. Hillary probably never used an email a day in her life. It's a story because it serves a greater agenda. And we've talked about it for years now, with Obama being the last president, that it works perfectly in their disposal that at the last minute they can indict Hillary Clinton, which leaves nobody running for the Democratic nomination. But have we not seen Obama in the news running with Hillary on the campaign trail now? When have you ever seen a sitting president jump on the campaign trail with a nominee, flying her all around in Air Force One? So Obama's already on the campaign trail once Hillary falls. And For those who may be listening, who may be having hard time understanding a lot of this, um, it was something that was said by the church a couple years ago with what happened with Ebola, and people thought Ebola was real. And we came on and were telling people, listen, Ebola is a lie. It's Ebola. It's not real. It's the government pushing an agenda, and people would not take heed. They were panicking, running around like chickens with their head cut off, thinking it was real. Well, here we are 2 years later, and where is Ebola now? At this point in time, Ebola should have infected and killed 90% of the American population, but it's like it never existed. As quick as it came, it disappeared and disappeared in thin air. It's because it was a lie. It was sorcery. So to the same way that we spoke about that particular hoax then, the Ebola hoax, we're speaking to these hoaxes that you see happening now. The San Bernardinos, the Orlandos, the Sandy hoaxes, Charleston hoax, Dallas hoax. And you notice with the Ebola situation, it wasn't it Dallas where this black African came over, and supposedly Dallas was ground zero for Ebola. And now here we are again, and we see Dallas as ground zero for policemen being shot, supposedly, and how they're using Dallas as one of the cities to push this. So when you start connecting the dots, it's not easy to see that these are hoaxes and they serve a purpose. That there is so many levels of magic that's being casted. Like, for instance, you look at some of the numerology with this, right? It was July the 7th, 2016, when these so-called police officers got shot in Dallas, right? We know that July is the seventh month. It happened the seventh day, and you look at the year in 16, that also is 7. Fast forward to what happened today, July 14th, 2016. You have a so-called Bastille Day attack. You have July the 7th month, 14, which is 2 sevens, and then you have 16, 1 plus 6 is 7. You have these sevens once again. And 7, Aleister Crowley actually has a book. Let me see if I can get the name of this book Aleister Crowley has real quick, because I've seen somebody actually put it up. It's actually called 777 and Other Kabbalistic Writings of Aleister Crowley. I haven't read the book. I haven't researched the book. But we know that 7s is an occultic number and is used for occultic magic, Kabbalistic magic. When the people were reported dead yesterday, as soon as it happened, they had a death count of how many people got killed. How could you know that quick how many people died? Wasn't it an explosion? There should be body parts everywhere. How can you identify how many people with body parts everywhere, how many people it is? That quick, as soon as it happens. How many people was it? 77 people dead. 77 divisible by 7? Yes. 11 times 7 is 77. So we see 7s once again. What about the next number they give us? 84. Now it's 84 people confirmed dead. Isn't 84 also divisible by 7? Yes. 12 times 7 is 84. And this, you see, this is how they communicate for those that understand the esoteric language that they speak in. But at the same time, it's magic and witchcraft and sorcery cast on the minds of the masses to put them in this deep trance. And speaking of that, they have another movie that was recently released that I actually just saw today called Now You See Me Too, with the all-seeing eye. And they were showing you in this movie how they program you. how they put you to sleep, how they use sorcery and magic. They're showing Hollywood is showing you exactly what they're doing and what they've done to the masses. Look at the Dallas shooting. 11 officers injured, 4 dead was the first initial number out. What is 11 times 4? 44. Who's number 44? Obama. More false flags, what they would call shootings or mass shootings, have happened under Obama than pretty much all presidents combined. I'll see if I can find that number, but it's it's disproportionate how many of these scenarios have happened under Obama. And what perfect scenario to have it happen than under a black president, the first so-called black president of the United States. Then you look up and you see a memorial service for these fallen Dallas police officers. They rolled George Bush out his coffin, this vampire who has been in hiding in the dark. They rolled him out in the midst of a Wilcott report that's exposing America and the UK's lies to take America into 9/11. Into Iraq after what happened on September the 11th. They had Tony Blair on blast. They had him on the hot seat. Bush was nowhere to be found. So no sooner than this, a report was put out. You have the Dallas situation happen. All of these things now get swept under the rug. Bush's war crimes are not to be spoken of against him because now all eyes are focused on Dallas in the morning there and what's going on. But while they're at this memorial service, everybody's laughing, everybody's joking and having a good time. Bush is up dancing and they're mocking us. They're glorifying in what they've accomplished and how they have so easily deceived the minds of the masses. Obama gets up, he speaks, and it's just amazing that this guy, when he speaks in front of an audience, that he's the biggest comedian. Like everything he says, people are just laughing like it's just hysterical. It's just so funny. He is just such a funny guy. And this is supposed to be a memorial service for dead officers, but everybody's laughing. Every 2 minutes he says something, people are giving standing ovations, clapping to everything he's saying. This is part of their sorcery, to give you a perception and a perspective of what you're seeing on the television is real and it's truthful when it's telling you lies and programming you. All right, so you have the Brexit situation where Britain is seceding from the UK, and they said the people voted. There was no vote. There is no such thing as a vote. People do not have the power to dictate and control the course of what's happening in the world as far as when it comes to their agendas. They would never give people that power. There was no vote. This was something that was designed to happen from the beginning so that now when things start to collapse economically and otherwise in Europe, they can blame the people of the UK. You voted to exit the EU. So therefore, it's on your shoulders for why the collapse has happened. Not on us as the government. David Cameron's resigning. He's jumping ship. He's getting to the nearest life raft. So you can't come find him and hang him up in a tree when this thing goes down. Getting out of Dodge. He said, I'm not the captain to steer this ship now that the UK has left the EU. The people will be blamed. And there's articles that we're going to read on that along with other things that we're speaking about. But it's time for people to really wake up to what's really going on. Because as long as you know that the media is lying to you, that the government is lying to you, then you can't get emotionally caught up in what's going on in these events because you know it's not real. But as long as you think it's real, speaking about the black man that got shot and there was blood, have you not seen a movie to where people are getting shot and blood is splattering everywhere and it looks real? Yes, they can make it look like somebody got shot and they're bleeding. It's not that hard. They have CGI, which is sorcery, to make you look and think you have a spaceship out in space somewhere and it looks so real. A lot of these media rooms are set up on green screens where it may look like they're at the location. They're not at the location. It's a green screen. Sorcery. They got all type of five-pointed stars spinning and circling around the screen while they talk. Sigil magic. Further encapsulating the minds of the masses into a deep trance and into a sleep as they continue to spew their lies, and so that you can believe them. All right. So to truly disconnect, you have to really be able to see and have discernment of what's really going on in these last days. That we are in a time of the greatest deception the world has ever seen. And when we say civil war doesn't mean just race versus race. Civil is short for civilians. So anything where the civilians are divided is civil war. Whether it's race versus race, gender versus gender, and now they got transgender to where you can't even tell the difference between who's who, what race is what. What gender is what. This political party versus that political party. Even in sports, this team versus that team, any way they can divide you is what they're trying to do so now they can conquer you. The EU, the UK, the Brexit, more division. Those who are for it, those who are against it. The UK versus Germany, Germany versus the UK on the exit. Their blueprint is meticulous, but it's not hard to understand because they use the same blueprint over and over and over again. They don't have to change it because the people aren't smart enough to catch on to their game. The people are in a trance. Now, going into the news, there's some scriptures that I wanted to read to show you exactly what was prophesied to happen and is happening and what they're doing. And if we get caught up in it, we will be just another number that got lost in the sauce. I'm in Matthew 24, verse 7. For nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. That's nationality against nationality, country versus country. And it's what we're seeing happening as we speak. The next scripture. One moment. One moment. We're at Matthew 12. Verse 25. And it reads, And Yeshua knew their thoughts and said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. So the adversary understands and knows this. Satan knows this. And this is a tactic that he's using. And Christ prophesied and said that this is what would happen. So people are being divided on every social dynamic that they can be divided on. Because if you're divided, you cannot fight against this new world order. You cannot fight against demons if you're divided all the way down to your house, to where people in the house don't even agree with each other when it comes to stuff. How can you now fight together? Can two walk together unless they be agreed? No. Let's go to Daniel. More prophecy. We're at Daniel chapter 2, verse 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of the potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So even Daniel is looking at the last kingdom in the earth leading up to before the time that Christ returns and seeing that they are divided. So we are in times of division. This is the time of the divide. And there's another movie that comes to my mind that was actually called The Divide, dealing with an apocalyptic scenario of a nuclear bomb going off in America. And you can see, the reason why it was called The Divide, because everybody was against each other. When times get crazy and it comes to survival and eating and staying alive, people will be divided and against each other, and it will be survival of the fittest. And that's why it is important for us in these times, before things get all out crazy, that we are spending every moment that we have building together with those of like minds and growing together so that we don't get caught up in the division, in the spirit of division that keeps us separated to where we can't come together and survive. So we're not fighting. Because if we're fighting like crabs in a barrel now, us as black people, how will we act towards each other when the stuff hits the fan and all hell breaks loose? And we can't even be respectable with each other now. We can't even get along and come together and forget about our personal agendas and our personal feelings to look at the bigger picture for us as a people. Yeah, we scream Israel and we the Israelites, but we sure don't act like Israelites. We don't come together in that spirit of one, of unity. We fighting and snapping and destroying each other, even within the church. And this is what Paul said when he said that there be divisions among you, and I partly believe it. And this has to happen so that those who are approved may be made manifest among you. So we know who is really down for the Most High and who is just faking the funk. That's the times we're coming into. The times of the purge, the times of the great divide. And we have to be in a spiritual mind to understand that you cannot fight this battle in the flesh. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. This is a spiritual battle. We can't get entangled with the matters of this world. Can you imagine Christ and the disciples during the times of ancient Rome going to protest against Caesar and say, I'm going to go join Israelite Lives Matter and go against Caesar? Do we see any stories of that going on, of the disciples going and doing this? Or did Christ tell them to go out to the lost sheep and preach the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves? That I send you out amongst wolves. So the gospel is to be preached. Those that can hear, that can see, those are the ones that must be reached out to. not for us to go jump out in these streets and jump in with these protesters. That's an easy, quick way to get killed and be just another number. You want to jump out there with Black Lives Matter, with these psychological intel pro psyops that the government has set up so that they can now, facial recognition photos of you and have a put together dossiers on you as being part of these CIA funded groups and get caught up in that? Or are we going to deal with the things the scriptures tells us to deal with, to go and teach the gospel and use this as an opportunity to try to reach our people and let them know that this is all biblical, that this is all prophetic, and that we live in a world of lies, and that the rabbit hole goes deep when it comes to the level that they would lie. All right, so when the elders speak, right, you're talking about men who the Most High has chosen as His anointed. The elders aren't speaking just off opinion. The elders are speaking, with high levels of wisdom and much research. The burden of proof is not on us to go out and prove that these events are hoaxes. The burden of proof is not on me to do that. The burden of proof is on those who are telling you these events are real and that people are dying. The burden of proof is on them to show you with evidence that these things really happen. They're the ones coming with the official story, not me. I'm just asking questions and showing you what I see are holes. So the burden of proof is on them to bring forth the truth and to show, as the scriptures say, prove all things, hold fast to that which is good. It's no different if you went to a Christian church and you got the pastor in the church, he's buck dancing across the stage saying, the Bible says this and the Bible says that. And you stand up in the church and you're like, Pastor, can you show me the book, chapter, and verse to what you're saying? And the pastor looks at you with this baffled, worrisome look with sweat running down his brow, knowing that he can't go into no Bible to show you no scriptures. So the same way that we hold Christians accountable to show us and prove what scripture is that, you must now hold these people who are telling you and giving you these stories. Give me the proof that these things are actually happening, that people are actually dying. Don't just get up and show me a couple pictures and a couple of snapshots of some video and follow behind that with hours and hours and hours of official story and narrative that seems to change every time a new segment comes up, where they can't even get the story right. And when you lie, that's the problem. When you lie, you have to follow that lie with more lies. That's why they can never get the story straight. And what's done in the dark will come to light. So it's just a matter of time before their lies get exposed. All right, so let's go ahead and go into some of these articles that we have. I just wanted to, kind of give my thoughts on everything that's going on, and because I'm seeing a lot of people waking up to these hoaxes and seeing that they are actually hoaxes. A lot of them, majority of them. But there are some people that are still caught up in thinking that these things are real to a certain degree, that the actual people are dying. But let's go to our first article we have here, the Economic Collapse website, the economiccollapseblog.com. This is July 10th, 2016. It says, War on the Streets of America. Protesters attack police officers in major cities all over the nation. Right? And you have a lot of agent provocateurs, a lot of people who are causing and inciting a lot of this chaos, and not actually real people, but real people tend to get caught up because these demons jump from one person to the next and they manifest. And this is why, another reason why I say not to get caught up in this, because before you know it, you never know what you might be doing out in these streets. It says, this is what a nation looks like when it starts melting down from within. A series of very disturbing incidents of police brutality against young black males has caused a firestorm to erupt all across the country. And you see, this is exactly what they want. This is exactly what they need for their agenda. It says you would have thought that the massacre of police in Dallas would have caused everyone to step back and reflect on what is really causing this cycle of violence. But instead, the nationwide protests have gotten even bigger and more intense. Over the weekend, protesters attacked police with rocks, bricks, bottles, fireworks, chunks of concrete, Molotov cocktails, and rebar from a construction site. In return, police fired pepper spray, smoke bombs, and tear gas at protesters. As I write this, more than 200 protesters have been arrested over the weekend so far, and authorities are bracing for what the coming night will bring. For so long, I have been specifically warning that this kind of civil unrest was coming, but I truly wish that it would have turned out that I was wrong. As a nation, we need to learn to love one another no matter what we look like or where we are from, but instead a cycle of violence has begun that is going to be very hard to break. On Saturday night, there was horrible violence against police in St. Paul, Minnesota. That is where my father was originally from, and I remember visiting my grandmother in St. Paul many times. Back in those days, I never would have imagined that someday we would see this kind of violence against law enforcement officers in the city. At least 5 officers were injured by protesters, one hit with a glass bottle and another by fireworks. According to St. Paul police, one was hit on the head with a large piece of concrete, possibly dropped from a bridge, according to police. Another officer had been hit in the head with a rock, though it is unclear the extent of the injuries. Police say a Molotov cocktail was thrown at officers. Law enforcement used crowd control measures, including smoke, and fired marking rounds similar to paintball rounds. And police said police spokesman Steve Linders. According to another report, protesters were dropping 10-pound concrete blocks on officers' heads, throwing bricks at their heads and genitals, and lobbing Molotov cocktails. One of the officers that had a concrete block dropped on his head had his spine fractured. This is absolutely no excuse for attacking police officers in this manner, none whatsoever. I want to share with you a series of tweets that were sent out by the St. Paul police during the attacks. Person with laser sight pointing it at officers, fireworks being fired at officers by protesters. Officer injured by fireworks thrown by protesters. Protesters now arming themselves with rebar from construction site. Protesters on overpass throwing objects at officers, dumping liquid on officers. Officer injured after being hit with a glass bottle thrown by protesters. Aggressors now throwing rebar from construction zone at officers. Rocks continue to fly at officers. Another officer has been injured by aggressors throwing objects. 3 injured so far. Bricks now being thrown at officers along with more rocks and bottles. An officer has been hit in the head with a rock. Unclear the extent of injuries. Another officer hit in the head with a large piece of concrete, possibly dropped from a bridge. Molotov cocktail thrown at officers. Unclear if anyone injured. And you see, this is the exact spirit that they want you to be in. The spirit of violence, the spirit of rebellion. And, you know, reading this, talking about Hollywood, do you think it was any coincidence that of the timing of the release of the movie Straight Outta Compton, where you had NWA, whose most famous song was F the Police? Right? Do you think that was any coincidence that they timed it at this time to come out with that movie, and how that movie was glorified by so many people that are higher up, all the way down to Obama? Whereas when I grew up and NWA came out, NWA was condemned, not worshiped, not glorified by politicians and others. But now we're in a time where NWA is being promoted. And this is exactly the reason why they want you to be in the spirit of kill the police. Where the scripture says, be angry but sin not. It also tells us to even to love our enemies. It doesn't mean that the police aren't out of their minds and that they aren't out of control and doing all type of wicked acts themselves, but that doesn't give us the right to render evil for evil. And again, like I said, a lot of these situations aren't real. It's just to get you incited to go against the police. And we're gonna go deeper into exactly why they want you to go at the police. Because now, no longer is a story about black men being killed. Now the story has been shifted to people killing police. And it just further justifies when the time comes for the police to kill black people. Reading on. As I have warned before, a spirit of violence and civil unrest is rising in America, and it wasn't just in St. Paul that we saw these kind of various dangerous attacks on police officers. In Baton Rouge, a police officer had several of his teeth knocked out after being hit by a projectile thrown by protesters. But it could have been a lot worse, according to the Daily Mail. Law enforcement authorities confiscated 3 rifles, 3 shotguns, and 2 pistols from the rioters. In Phoenix, protesters launched rocks and projectiles at police, and many of them reportedly shouted, "We should shoot you." In San Antonio, someone fired multiple gunshots at the San Antonio Police Headquarters building on Saturday night. Multiple gunshots were fired at San Antonio Police Headquarters building Saturday night, and police are seeking a suspect who was seen running from the area. SAPD Chief William McManus said. The shots were fired just before 10 p.m. Saturday. There were no reports of injuries, but bullet marks were found on the exterior wall of the building, McManus said. Shell casings were discovered in a nearby alley. The mainstream media would have us believe that the shooter in Dallas was a lone nut that acted alone, and that his behavior was not part of a larger trend, but they completely ignored another mass shooting motivated by hate that occurred just hours before the shootings in Dallas. Hours before a Black Army veteran shot 12 officers at a Black Lives Matter protest in Dallas, another former Army soldier was accused of shooting indiscriminately at passing cars and police on a Tennessee highway. And like the Dallas sniper, Lakeem Keon Scott said he was motivated to act in response to police violence against African Americans, authorities said Friday. 1 woman died and 3 others, including a police officer, were wounded Thursday morning in the Tennessee rampage, one of the several spasms of violence across the country this week amid boiling tensions over policing and race. And speaking about what happened in Dallas with this so-called lone wolf sniper, was there not another lone wolf sniper in Dallas before? Are we not seeing a similar, somewhat similar scenario repeated? If we go back a few decades, 4 or 5 decades, back to Kennedy being shot by a Patsy and Lee Harvey Oswald, a sniper, and then he ends up being murdered within 24 hours of so-called killing John F. Kennedy, because dead men tell no tales. The same reason they can say they blew up a Dallas sniper in a garage somewhere with the Terminator drone. No body, no evidence. He was blowing the smithereens. We can't show you a dead body. How convenient. Oh, he can't go to trial if he was real, if this really did happen. Because again, dead men tell no tales. So these are questions that we have to ask when these things happen. It's always a lone wolf sniper, and then all of a sudden he's dead. Or a lone wolf attacker who I mean, is just cold with weaponry. I mean, this guy was able to do all the damage he did by himself. I mean, just this is what they want us to believe, that this is how it happened. Just like in Orlando. You mean to tell me one guy went in and killed 50 people and injured 50 more? It says here, and the incident in Dallas could have turned out to be far worse. According to authorities in Dallas, Micah Johnson was found to have had bomb-making materials in his home and was planning a larger attack. And of course, it's always bomb-making materials in their homes. Whether it's ISIS that they want to say that this particular individual went on a shooting spree, they go back to his house, he had bomb-making materials. Whether it's Micah Johnson enraged about race, he had bomb-making materials at his home. And this also demonizes veterans because he was an Army vet, a military vet, because they need veterans demonized. That helps their agenda. They can say, these veterans have come back from these wars, they're mentally ill. We need to bring them into our centers and let them see some of our doctors, because when this thing goes down, Army veterans are going to be one of the greatest threats to their New World Order, because they have been trained for survival. They have been trained to kill, and they can lead people to survive. So these are a major threat. So a lot of birds can be killed with one stone with these events. It says here, the gunman who killed 5 cops in Dallas was planning a larger attack but launched his assault early because the protest was too good an opportunity to miss, a police source said. Veteran Micah Johnson went out the rampage with an AR-15 assault rifle and a handgun on Thursday night, but left explosive material at home. And that's something else that's always the same. It's always an AR-15 and a handgun every time. So they can then push the gun control agenda. A law enforcement source told WFAA that Johnson was planning something bigger but cut preparations short because he knew scores of police officers would man the Black Lives Matter protest. And something else that sticks out to me is that you say he had bomb-making materials at his house, right? Did they ever show you any proof of this, or did they just tell you that, and you're supposed to believe it? Not that if they did show anything that would be proof in itself, but they didn't even show you that, because they don't have to. All they got to do is tell you, and people will believe it. And that just goes to show you how powerful media is, to where even people know it's false flag will believe that people actually died or die in these events off of hearsay, off of words. It says here, at times like this, we desperately need strong leaders to step forward and calm everyone down. Unfortunately, the great leaders of the past are long gone, and they have been replaced by politicians that are trying to figure out how they can best use this unrest for their own political advantage. Instead of hating one another, we need to start loving one another. Without love, our nation is going to die. I wish that everyone in the country could be made to understand this, but unfortunately, most Americans have chosen a different path, and now we will suffer the consequences. And the thing of it is, we can't stop what's coming, but we can get out the way. It's Bible prophecy. Trying to stop this from happening is like fighting against the Most High himself. It's senseless. So the best thing for us to do, as Zephaniah 3:1 tells us, is gather thyself together, O nation not desired, so that you can be hid in the day of the Most High's anger. We want to be hidden. When the Most High's wrath goes through this earth, we don't want to be found. So what does this lead to? The fact that police are now supposedly being shot at, being supposedly killed, injured. This is what it opens up the door for. This is off of Government Slaves, govtslaves.info. Pentagon approves UN use of force against civilians. The federal government, and this is see if there's a date. July 15th? No, that's not the date. I'm looking for a date on this article. It doesn't have a date, but this just came out within this week. It says the Pentagon has approved a scheme allowing UN peacekeeping troops to police U.S. citizens. Because when the police can't handle the people, now you must send in the military. It says the federal government has announced their support for a set of principles that allows UN troops to police and use force in order to protect citizens in the event of an armed conflict. Now let's go into the actual main part of this information. Well, we'll go into that in a moment. We'll go into the fact that the UN is now about to be rolled out, not just in America, worldwide, but they will be rolled out as the new police in America. And remember, Obama sits at the head of the UN Council. Sits on two thrones, the U.S. presidency and the UN Council. This is off the economiccollapseblog.com. What is the government preparing for? And this is dated June 28, 2016, and it's got a picture of a UN vehicle on a flatbed. And if anybody may not be aware, there was some video footage that came out starting in West Virginia and in Virginia of these UN vehicles being shipped from coast to coast across America. This was a few weeks back. This is before all of this kind of got built up. All right, so let's read this article here. You may not be getting prepared for a major national disaster, but the government sure is. I have been informed that in recent months, numerous emergency food companies have been contacted by the government, and they have been told that their inventories could potentially be seized in the event of a significant emergency. And as you will see below, the government recently participated in an exercise that simulated an unprecedented global food crisis lasting as long as a decade. Because in the event of a collapse, in the event of social unrest, you're going to have a food crisis. They've already been showing us this with these EBT systems glitching out and not working for the past couple months. They've already given us the birth pangs that's coming when they cut this food off, when the abomination of desolation is rolled out full scale. It says, in addition, NPR has just revealed details about the very secretive Strategic National Stockpile Program that is storing billions of dollars worth of medical supplies in warehouses around the nation. This is a program that most Americans do not even know exists. On top of everything else, strange reports of military vehicles with UN markings have been coming in from all over the nation. So what in the world is the government up to? Why are they working so feverishly hard to get prepared? Let's begin our discussion with the Strategic National Stockpile. According to NPR, there are at least 6 of these warehouses at various locations around the country, and they are holding at least $7 billion worth of supplies. Thousands of lives might someday depend on the stockpile, which holds all kinds of medical supplies that the officials would need in the wake of a terrorist attack with a chemical, biological, or nuclear weapon. The location of these warehouses is secret. How many there is secret. Although a former government official recently said at a public meeting that there are 6. And exactly what's in them is secret. If everybody knows exactly what we have, then you know exactly what you can do to us that we can't fix, says Burrell. And we just don't want that to happen. What he will reveal is how much the stockpile is worth. We currently have the inventory at a little over $7 billion. The NPR report indicates that most of the supplies are medical in nature, and this includes millions of doses of vaccines. Could it be possible the government is anticipating a major pandemic in our near future? As I mentioned above, the government has also been preparing for a major food crisis. The following comes from Vice. The U.S. national security industry is planning for the impact of an unprecedented global food crisis lasting as long as a decade, according to reports by a government contractor. The studies published by CNA Corporation in December 2015, unreported until now, describe a detailed simulation of a protracted global food crisis from 2020 to 2030. The simulation, titled Food Chain Reaction, was a desktop gaming exercise involving the participation of 65 officials from the U.S., Europe, Africa, India, Brazil, and key multilateral and intergovernmental institutions. So could we actually see a major food crisis during the years ahead? Well, according to Reuters, global demand for food has already been surging, and one new report indicates that it won't be too long before we could see a doubling of food prices. Swelling populations and demand for food combined with even scarcer water and land resources could lead to a doubling of food prices and trigger civil unrest in some developing countries, a new report says. And we're seeing civil unrest happening over food, energy crisis in Venezuela. Demand for food with a higher environmental impact, such as meat, has surged as emerging countries like China and India grow in size and in wealth, said Martin Halley, policy analyst at Global Footprint Network. A few things are very clear. The demand for food is going up tremendously because of population growth, he told the Thomson Reuters Foundation. Of course, it is the job of the government to prepare for various apocalyptic scenarios. If government officials weren't planning for how our nation would make it through a major disaster, they wouldn't be doing their jobs. But what are we to make of all the strange sightings of UN vehicles all over America recently? According to my friend Ray Gaino, UN military vehicle activity has recently been reported in Texas, Mississippi, Arizona, Florida, and now in Virginia. In particular, a series of photos of white UN military vehicles traveling through Virginia that were posted on Facebook by Jeff Stern has popped up in news stories worldwide. Is all of this activity unusual? If so, should we be alarmed by it? Brandon Tuberville apparently thinks so. For the past day or so, military convoys have been witnessed traveling both north and south with lines of equipment ranging from Humvees, troop transport trucks, and tankers to military personnel following the convoy in civilian vehicles. Interestingly enough, many of the soldiers traveling in the convoy were seen wearing helmets, an unusual procedure for a simple convoy. In addition, the convoys were carrying what appeared to be construction equipment. Although the troop movement may indeed have been a routine convoy, and the UN vehicles may also have been a routine shipment from a manufacturing facility or even a simple and benign transport, the controversy brewing in the U.S. elections and the potential for civil unrest, the dangers of economic collapse, and the potential conflict with Russia are all potentials for the use of UN peacekeepers inside the U.S., as many have posted in the past, as well as for some type of martial law scenario. The armored UN vehicles that were spotted being transported through Virginia are quite impressive. Here's some info on them from the Daily Mail. The VX weighs in at 16,600 pounds, seating for 2 plus 8 crew. Windows do not roll down. Instead, they are locked gun ports on the vehicle that can be opened to shoot bullets out or accept documents in, and are even big enough to pass through a can of soda. In addition, these heavily armed vehicles are designed to withstand a gas attack and to be impervious to small arms fire. Internal fans can keep bad air out, such as in the event of gas attack, or bring fresh air in when reversed. PA systems to speak to the outside world. Remote-controlled spotlights on the roof and pairs of red and blue strobe lights are mounted to each 4 sides of the vehicle. Every window on the vehicle is filled with ballistic glass that will shed small arms fire like pebbles, even resist a close-range shot from a high-powered rifle. Each vehicle has 9 gun ports, and so when they are fully manned, they can lay down a very impressive field of fire. At the end of the day, I don't know what all this means. Everything that I just detailed could be part of a normal government activity that is simply receiving some unusual attention right now. Well, of course, it could be used. It could all be possible if the government is getting prepared for something really big. But even if they were, they would not tell us in advance anyway. Personally, I'm convinced that this period of time leading up to the election will be highly chaotic in America. And so my eyebrows definitely perked up when I came across these various news stories. But ultimately, the significance of all this will be determined by what happens during the weeks and months to come. Without a doubt, things have become much more serious in this nation lately, and I have a feeling that they are about to get a whole lot more serious. All right, so speaking of things leading up to the election, takes us to our next article. Next article comes on endoftheamericandream.com. Republican convention to get hit next. FBI and DHS warn of violence and terror at the RNC. All right, this is July 14th, 2016. After what just happened in Nice, France, officials are likely even more concerned about the potential for violence and terrorism at the RNC in Cleveland next week. Details are still coming in as I write this article, but what we know so far is that a 31-year-old Tunisian man plowed his truck into a huge crowd that was gathered along the waterfront for a fireworks display during Bastille Day celebrations in the French city of Nice. And he reportedly shouted, Allahu Akbar, at the police before they shot him dead. So, of course, it's another ISIS scenario. And again, you have Charlie Hebdo. You had the so-called Paris shootings that happened at the end of last year. Now you have this in Paris. It says his rampage of death reportedly lasted for 2 kilometers before he was finally stopped, and dozens have been killed. This comes on the heels of the massacre of 5 police officers in Dallas, and that came not too long after the worst mass shooting in U.S. history in Orlando. Clearly, we have entered a time when the usual rules don't apply anymore. So will the Republican National Convention be the next target to get hit? Right? And again, they've been hyping this Trump up every day in the news for over the past year or so, with all these racial remarks towards blacks and Mexicans. And Trump is an actor. All right? Trump does not decide what to say. He is a puppet. He is told what to say. His job is to sell it. But you have in Cleveland is a right to carry scenario. So people are going to be strapped. They've said the new Black Panther Party is going to be there strapped with guns. It says both the Republican and the Democratic conventions have been designated as national special security events. What this means is that the Secret Service will be running security at those venues. It is being projected that 50,000 people will attend the Republican convention. In addition to that, there will likely be tens of thousands of protesters. And let's make this clear. Nothing will happen at this event unless they plan for something to happen. And when I say something to happen, I mean something major. I'm not talking about, a couple of small little skirmishes. I'm talking about major catastrophe. Will only happen if it's something that they have on the menu to happen. It says here, so needless to say, this will represent a big, juicy target for anyone that wants to make some sort of a statement. We have already seen tremendous violence at Trump rallies in recent months, and there is no reason to think that the Republican convention will be any different. The radical left dislikes Donald Trump with a passion, and many leftist organizations have already stated that they plan to show up in Cleveland in force. As emotions run high, could something go terribly wrong? On Thursday, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and FBI Director James Comey both told Congress that they are extremely concerned. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and FBI Director James Comey told lawmakers on Thursday that they were preparing their agencies for possibility of violence, both from unruly demonstrators and terrorists, at the upcoming Republican and Democratic nominating conventions. It is likely that we are going to see more security at these conventions than we have ever seen before. In fact, Johnson told Congress that DHS will be sending approximately 3,000 agents to each of the conventions. I'm concerned about the prospect of demonstrations getting out of hand, Johnson said. I'm concerned about the possibility of violence. We have within DHS some 3,000 personnel that will be dedicated to the security of the Republican National Convention and the DNC. And Comey told Congress that he is particularly concerned about the potential for domestic terrorism. So here they go with that domestic terrorism, right? Because now black men are police killers, right? Black men are the new domestic terrorists. It says Comey told the committee that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was monitoring the threat of violence at the conventions very, very carefully. Anytime there is a national spotlight on a political event in the U.S., there is a risk that groups that aspire to do just that, engage in acts of domestic terrorism, will be attracted, Comey said. Of course, the feds are not just sitting back and waiting for the next week to roll around. As you read this article, they are actively monitoring social media and tracking protest groups in anticipation of what might happen. So they're telling you that they are watching and looking at your social media, seeing what you're saying, seeing what you're talking about. It's all being recorded. And that's why it's important, when you're using social media, what you're actually saying. Like, are you on there fighting with people and acting crazy? You could be looked at as a terrorist or somebody who's mentally unstable. They don't even need that much to say it. All they got to do is say it. But if you're doing that, that's just more reason for them to be able to use that against you. Law enforcement agencies are monitoring social media postings and tracking protest groups such as Black Lives Matter, which have Service is even using its Twitter accounts to warn users about their commentary. The agency tweeted recently, "Watch what you say on social media," with a link to a news story about how agents visited a man who joked about sending a bomb when Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders were visiting his region. For one, I am certainly glad that I am not going to be in Cleveland next week. The security is going to be absolutely suffocating. But no level of security can stop a deranged individual that is absolutely determined to kill people and that is not afraid to die. As we have seen, it only takes a few months for a gunman to start mowing down those around him or for a crazed lunatic to plow a truck into a crowd of people, right? So this is Cleveland, home of the current recent NBA champs and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So don't think that that's a coincidence either, that all this is happening in Cleveland. And one thing we do know is that there will be lots of guns in Cleveland. Some of the protesters have already announced that they plan to bring guns with them. And many of those attending the convention will be bringing guns as well. As the Republican convention in Cleveland approaches, several delegates from Pennsylvania who support Donald Trump say they are planning on bringing their guns with them to the GOP gathering. Why? They say they are worried about possible violent protests and even an attack from ISIS. So any time they can mention ISIS, anytime they can mention race, they're going to do it. Right? And all it takes is for one gunshot to go off. One gunshot go off, and all hell will break loose up in that place. Can you imagine? The citizens strapped with guns, Black Lives Matter with guns, New Black Panther Party with guns, the Ku Klux Klan with guns, the government with guns, everybody in an all-out firefight. And maybe shooting blanks at each other, not even real bullets. These are the scenarios that are, easily forming before our eyes of possibilities. It says here, James Klein, a pro-Trump delegate from the Harrisburg area, notes that guns won't be needed inside the convention hall and that delegates won't be allowed to bring in weapons. But he adds, there's the hotels. There's going to be dinners. We may get a preview of coming attractions during the nationwide Day of Rage protest on Friday. There are supposed to be protests in more than 30 cities, and they have been much hyped. We shall see if they amount to anything or if they just fizzle out. And that's another thing I've been hearing a lot about. I don't know much about it, but I have been hearing about this Day of Rage, um, you know, that's being done around the country. And I'm just like, just that doesn't even sound like a righteous spirit. Day of Rage, a day to go out and be rageful. Like, you should not, like again, the scripture says, be angry but sin not. You should not dwell in the spirit of rage or the spirit of anger. Be slow to wrath. But this is what they want. They want you raged up. They want you angry. They want to incite all these emotions in you: anger, fear. It says, regardless, it is clear that we have entered a time of increased violence. After what just happened in France, people all over the world are going to think twice before gathering for any sort of large public event. A huge crowd is an enticing target for any inspiring terrorist, and it is inevitable that we are going to see more attacks of this nature. The era of the free and open society is ending. As the violence and terror get progressively worse, our liberties and freedoms will be increasingly restricted, and we will be told that this is for our own good. Of course, this has already been happening since 9/11, but now we have entered a time when this process is going to accelerate significantly. And, something else that I wanted to make mention of when it comes to these events, yes, these events will continue. There will be more, and they will be bigger in scope. But there's been a lot of information coming out across the country in America that they are hiring in major cities crisis actors. Why are all these crisis actors and all these job postings for crisis actors being put up around the country? To show you that these are not real events. They've already done exercises and drills simulating pretty much every scenario we've seen. They've done a drill, and they need crisis actors to come and participate in these drills. Again, there's a lot of acting going on. All right, we have, of course, more articles to read, but before we get to those articles, we're going to take a quick commercial break. So when we come back, we will go into what do we have left here? We have, of course, U.S. endorses expansion of military force used by UN peacekeepers in combat zones. We also have, it's official, robots are now injuring and killing humans. All right, so when we come back, those are some of the articles that we'll be going into. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Folks, are you tired of chemicals? Harmful chemicals in your toothpaste, such as sodium lauryl sulfate, tricolsan, fluoride, preservatives, sugar, and more? Well, Exodus is the #1 company in making herbal tooth powder. This revolutionary herbal gum and tooth powder, which yields immediate results within 1 week, is ideal for the entire family. It reduces bleeding in the gums, counteracts the side effects of chemotherapy burning in the gum tissue, tightens the gum, whitens the teeth, rid the mouth of canker sores, freshens the breath, and restore the gum tissue to health. ExodusHerbalGumPowder.com. For more herbal products, visit us at ExodusGumPowder.com.
This is life-changing information. If you have health challenges that are not being resolved, then pay a visit to BRNaturally.com. Did you know that the Creator designed the body to regenerate? Weaknesses can be strengthened and the body brought back into balance to function at its optimum state. To assist the body's healing mechanism, I use body cleansing with herbal protocols in combination with the natural health laws. I aim to equip you with the necessary tools to help you achieve vibrant health. If you have the faith and commitment to do what is necessary to regain your health, then you are on the winning side. The initial 15 minutes talk is absolutely free. Visit www.beyondnaturally.com. Join the health revolution today.
Do you have a talent, a company, or a service to render? Would you like an avenue to get the word out? Well, GOCC Blog Talk Radio would like to connect with you to help fulfill your vision. Don't have a clear direction on where to go? It's okay. GOCC Blog Talk Radio can assist you with making your very own commercial. Call us now at 1-888-334-3330 and be on your way to the expansion of your business. That's 1-888-334-3330. GOCC Blog Talk Radio Station, starting the foundations for the building blocks of life. GOCC members ask for special rates.
All right, Shabbat Shalom. We are back, and not too long ago, I got some breaking news in from someone actually sent me a couple links. Breaking news, Turkish state TV, martial law has been declared in Turkey. And the reason they're saying that the military is looking to seize power from Erdogan, which is the Turkish president or prime minister. And it shows a picture of tanks rolling down the street. All right, so I guess that's what's going on in Turkey right now. So we'll go back to our articles. This is off the activistpost.com. This article is, one moment. It's official. Robots are now injuring and killing humans. July 13th, 2016. Even as robotics experts, universities, and tech luminaries sound the alarm about the potential for a future filled with killer robots, this technology evidently already has arrived, minus the All right. Let me see here. Okay. All right. So maybe he just went out for a moment. So let me see. Let me just check here one moment. Just one moment here. All right. So it was probably just I went out for a brief moment. So, but we are talking about the robots that are now injuring and killing humans or people. All right. Artificial intelligence is another area that has ushered in dual-use technologies such as drone surveillance and warfare, robot security guards and police, and self-driving vehicles for military and for civilians. In all cases, we are now seeing disturbing misapplications as well as outright system failures. In fact, we are seeing many firsts that are threatening to become a trend if not quickly addressed and reined in. Just a few weeks ago, we witnessed the first human death reported from a self-driving vehicle when Tesla's autopilot sensors failed to detect an oncoming tractor-trailer, killing the test driver. Previously, there were ominous signs of this potential when Google's self-driving cars first had failures that resulted in them being hit, but later actually caused an accident with a bus. Aside from the technical challenges, questions have been raised about the ethics and morality that would be required in certain fatal situations. That area, too, is raising eyebrows. Is it right to sacrifice the lives of some to save others? The standards are already becoming morally complex. Google X's Chris Urmson, the company's director of self-driving cars, said the company was trying to work through some difficult problems. Where to turn, toward the child playing in the road or over the side of the overpass. Google has come up with its own laws of robotics for cars. You try to say, let's try hardest to avoid vulnerable road users, and beyond that, try hardest to avoid other vehicles. And then beyond that, try to avoid things that don't even move in the world. And then to be transparent with the user that that's the way it works, Urmson said. These incidents and dilemmas have thus far occurred during training and testing, which might mitigate some of the seriousness, but nonetheless points to some genuine flaws that should preclude these vehicles from being widely employed. As a quick aside, it's essential to keep in mind that Isaac Asimov offered the world his 3 laws of robotics in 1942. Although they appeared in fiction, they since have been widely acknowledged within mainstream robotics, and in their original form are of such simple perfection that there is really no excuse for the errors that we are seeing. Number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given it by human beings except when such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. And they actually show this in the movie I, Robot. This is actually, these laws are stated in that movie. Nevertheless, artificial intelligence has already gained a foothold in all types of real-world service industries as well as security, despite it not being a stretch to imagine that the very same challenges and dangers that have appeared with self-driving vehicles and other autonomous systems. A marketing robot made the news for having got lost, leaving its staging area and wandering into a busy traffic intersection in Moscow, Russia. It was downplayed as a little adventure by the robot's owner, but the fact is that an autonomous robot failed to keep its bearings and wound up posing a genuine threat to human driver safety. The truth is that researchers are still in the process of developing foolproof sensor systems for robots to recognize their surroundings, yet they continue to be deployed into the real world. Case in point, the security robot. Security robots have become a special area of interest for developers. Since at least 2013, there has been a worldwide initiative into robotic security focusing on prisons, care facilities, schools, and malls. However, a recent run-in with robotic mall security didn't go well for one toddler at Stanford Shopping Center in California. The parents of a young boy who got knocked down and run over by a security robot at Stanford Shopping Center want to get the word out to prevent others from getting hurt. They said the machine is dangerous and fear another child will get hurt. Stanford Shopping Center security robot stands 5 feet tall and weighs 300 pounds. It amuses shoppers of all ages, but last Thursday, 16-month-old Harwin Chang had a frightening collision with the robot. The robot hit my son's head and he fell down facing down on the floor, and the robot did not stop and it kept moving forward, Harwin's mom, Tiffany Ting, said. Maybe they have to work out the sensors more. Maybe it stopped detecting or it could be buggy or something, shopper Ankur Sharma said. Harwin's parents say that what's even more worrisome is that the security guard told them another child was hurt from the same robot days before. But this still pales in comparison with what happens when security robots are given weapons, which is exactly what happened in the recent Dallas shooting. As Claire Burness reports in her article, the decision to blow up U.S. citizen with robot was improvised in less than 20 minutes. A robot that was previously used with benign intent to reach out to a suicide threat was modified to become an instrument of death equipped with a pound of C4 explosive. Manufactured by the military-industrial complex's darling, Northrop Grumman, this tactical robot is driven by a human via remote control, weighs 790 pounds, and has a top speed of 3.5 miles per hour. As the Washington Post described, it carries a camera with a 26x optical zoom and 12x digital zoom. When its arm is fully extended, it can lift a 60-pound weight. The hand at the end of the arm can apply a grip of about 50 pounds of force. Now, I want to stop right there, going back to what I said about these hoax events. You have this particular robot, which can only go 3.5 miles per hour, which is not fast at all. You have a supposedly deadly trained sniper who just killed 5 police officers, wounding several others. And you mean to tell me that a robot that was going 3.5 miles per hour with a C4 explosive device killed a trained sniper? That's how he went out? When snipers are trained to see things from miles away. They're trained. This guy is a military. He would know not to, be killed by this robot. So that's something else that I just really find hard to believe that is there's any truth to that part of the story at all. Like these are the questions I ask. And not only that, but you have these cameras that are pretty much everywhere now, and there's no footage of any of this. If we ever get any footage, there's always some blurry footage that you can't make out what's going on. But yet all of this is happening and there's no footage, just like in Orlando. And then in that nightclub, I seen a video recently where in Orlando they were showing the actual cameras set up in the club. So you mean to tell me the cameras didn't work that night? All of a sudden the cameras were down the night that this shooter supposedly killed all these people? Or maybe he went into the camera room and disabled the cameras before he did what he did, right? But reading on here, interestingly enough, the $151,000 tactical robot provided a far more life-affirming service just 1 year ago. According to the Metro UK, the same model once assisted the California Highway Patrol when negotiations with a man threatening to kill himself by jumping from a San Jose overpass failed by delivering a pizza. In just 1 year, a pizza-delivering robot with the potential to save human life during bomb threats or similar situation became a casually deployed, due process-stripping weapon of war against a U.S. citizen. We are now left to wonder what more is on the horizon as artificial intelligence advances to the point where humans feel compelled to completely take the leash off of this technology, even in war and domestic security. China already is prepared to unleash its robot army as a means of combating terrorism, and we are now being warned by the UN that terrorists very well could establish their own killer robot army, which will presumably require us to counter that with even more lethal robotics and yet another arms race. So you mean to tell me that the United Nations is saying that ISIS is about to develop its own killer robot army? Are you serious? Like, this is what they expect us to believe. This type of nonsense. So because ISIS is going to create a killer robot army, we need to then make even bigger and greater robot armies to combat theirs. You see what this, when they make these type of statements, then what it allows them to do? It then allows them the excuse to do it, and people won't question it. When you can have this particular type of robot supposedly kill a terrorist, right, it now sets the precedence for them to say that we are now going to hunt you down with robots. Hey, you may not even be guilty, but if they say you're guilty, then you're guilty. And they'll do it, and there'll be no proof or any due process for you. They can make up any story they want and say, yeah, he was a terrorist, he did this. They show a couple pictures of you, and then they got a perfect story. And let's not forget about the NDAA that Obama signed, which actually gives them the complete authority to do just this. So, they put out the movies, these robotic movies, especially Terminator. Skynet is here. They got the drones in the air. They got the robots now that they're telling you are going in and dropping bombs on people. So, they're letting us know we're about to be hunted down by these robots. It appears that we might have to be prepared to come full circle in this march toward technology being used to provide security. At the very foot of this drive will always be a human component. Until we solve the issues surrounding our own misapplication of morals and ethics, our real military, police, and security injure and kill other humans after all, we might be destined only to provide a more lethal upgrade of ourselves. So if military and police injure and kill other people, do you not think that robots would do that and even greater damage? That's what this statement is saying. A more lethal upgrade to what people are already doing. Which takes us to our last article, which is what we read about earlier. Not only do we have robot killer drones and Terminator robots, and not only do we have police supposedly being shot and killed, now here comes the UN to solidify all of this. It's off of activistpost.com. U.S. endorses expansion of military force used by UN peacekeepers in combat zones. So in Dallas, when that happened, that would be considered a combat zone in the midst of what they said happened in Dallas. That would be considered a combat zone. Let's send in our peacekeepers. And we know when they say peace what they really mean. July 14, 2016. In yet another step towards the establishment of a world military force that seeks peace through the absence of dissent, the U.S. announced its support in May for a set of principles that will allow the United Nations peacekeeping troops and UN police to use force in order to protect civilians in combat zones and areas of armed conflict. U.S. Ambassador to the UN and a notorious warmonger against Libya and Syria, Samantha Power, stated that the Kigali principles would make peacekeeping missions more effective, improve security, and save lives. The Kigali principles are designed to make sure that civilians are not abandoned by the international community again, said Power. The Kigali principles call for countries who contribute troops to UN missions to give UN peacekeeping commanders the authority to use military force against armed actors with clear hostile intent to harm civilians without waiting for approval from the UN and its member states. And that's something else that jumps out to me, how they always call in these scenarios the hostile people actors, even in the mainstream media, these actors, because again, that's exactly what you're seeing happening is a bunch of crisis acting, right? There's no reason to use the term actors in that regard. I think there's better words that can be used, but this is the word play that they use when they speak and they make these loose statements. They have truth in what they're saying if you listen carefully and read between the lines. It says here, if a commander has to wait hours and hours for guidance from capital, it may mean not being able to react in time to repel a fast approaching attack on a nearby village, Power added. The Kigali Initiative was introduced by the U.S., the Netherlands, and Rwanda in 2015. According to a report from the Military Times, UN peacekeeping forces from the 29 countries signing on to the principles are now required to act if civilians are in danger. 29 countries represent less than a third of the UN members and includes Austria, Bangladesh, Belgium, Burkina Faso, Canada, Djibouti, Estonia, Ethiopia, Finland, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Germany, Ghana, Guinea, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Malawi, Montenegro, Netherlands, Niger, Poland, Romania, Rwanda, Senegal, Slovenia, Sri Lanka, Sweden, Togo, Ukraine, Uganda, U.S., Uruguay, and Zambia. Notably absent from the list of signatories is Russia, China, Iran, and Lebanon, as well as a number of other anti-NATO countries. The possibility of UN forces being used as a wider and seemingly more official and credible invading force is very real, especially in places like Syria, where despite all evidence to the contrary, the U.S., GCC, the West in general, and the UN continually harp about Assad's crimes against humanity and civilians, while ignoring the crimes of the Western-backed terrorists who have run rampant across the country, displaying a clear institutional bias against states like Syria who operate outside of the totally control of the Anglo-European, Anglo-American banking axis. Likewise, many civilians may be as worried about the UN peacekeepers as they are of their own despotic governments and warlords after a trail of sexual abuse, rapes, assaults, and murders have been left in the UN's wake in places like Haiti, Congo, Ivory Coast, Libya, Mali, Sudan, and Central African Republic. And notice how all of those are all African, people of African origins, which we know are the children of Israel. Many are concerned about the growing power of UN in domestic national matters, particularly after reports of recent sightings of UN vehicles being carried on flatbed trucks began making their rounds on the internet and alternative media networks, while many skeptic organizations like Snopes tried to debunk the sightings as mere transport of American manufactured vehicles to coastal ports. Manufactured by BAE, WorldNet Daily contacted BAE and Aplaneco, who denied that the vehicles belonged to their company. The Kigali principles are as follows. We, the troop and police contributing countries following the International Conference on the Protection of Civilians held in Kigali from 28 to 29 May 2015 under the theme Protection of Civilians Through Peacekeeping, from mandates designed to implementation, bringing together the top 30 troop and police contributing countries, the top 10 financial contributing countries, and other stakeholders. And after deliberations on how to effectively implement the protection of civilians, mandates and peacekeeping operations pledged the following. Number one, to train all of our troops on the protection of civilians prior to their deployment to missions. Number two, to ensure that our sector and contingent commanders, as well as our nominees for mission leadership positions, have a high level of training and preparedness on peacekeeping operations, and in particular the protection of civilians. Number three, to be prepared to use force to protect civilians as necessary and consistent with the mandate. Such action encompasses making a show of force as a deterrent, interpositioning our forces between armed actors and civilians, and taking direct military action against armed actors with clear hostile intent to harm civilians. Number four, not to stipulate caveats or other restrictions that prevent us from fulfilling our responsibility to protect civilians in accordance with the mandate. Number five, to identify and communicate to the UN any resource and capability gaps that inhibit our ability to protect civilians. And you notice how all of this, they're all saying, oh, it's to protect civilians. Oh, it's to protect civilians. No, it's to enslave you into their New World Order. They're just using the term protect civilians and peacekeeping so that you'll say, yeah, come right on in. Come right on in, UN peacekeeping troops, to my neighborhood and protect me from the terrorist domestic thugs that are running loose and going crazy. That's what this is designed to have you do. Number six, to strive within our capabilities to contribute the enabling capabilities, for example, helicopters, to peacekeeping operations that facilitate improved civilian protection. Number seven, to avoid undue delay in protecting civilians. by investing our contingent commander with the authority to use force to protect civilians in urgent situations without the need for further consultations with capital. Number 8, not to hesitate to take action to protect civilians in accordance with the rules of engagement in the absence of an effective host government response or demonstrated willingness to carry out its responsibilities to protect civilians. Number 9, to demand clarity from the UN and mission leadership on our rules of engagement, including under which circumstances the use of force is appropriate. Number 10, to seek to identify as early as possible potential threats to civilians and proactively take steps to mitigate such threats and otherwise reduce the vulnerability of the civilian population. Number 11, to seek to enhance the arrangements for rapid deployment, including by supporting a full review of the UN standby arrangements, exploring a system in which each earmarked units from troop and police contributing countries could be placed in readiness in order to ensure rapid troop deployment, and encouraging the utilization of partnerships with regional organizations such as the African Union and its RECs. Number 12, to be vigilant in monitoring and reporting any human rights abuses or signs of impending violence in the areas in which our personnel serve. Number 13, to take disciplinary action against our own personnel if and when they fail to act to protect civilians when circumstances warrant such action. Number 14, to take our own review in parallel to any after-action review in the event that our personnel are unable to protect civilians, and identify and share key lessons for avoiding such failures in the future. Number 15, to hold our own personnel to the highest standard of contact to vigorously investigate and, where appropriate, prosecute any incidents of abuse. Number 16, to better implement protection of civilian mandates and deliver on our responsibilities, we request better, regular, and more extensive consultations on the mandating of peacekeeping missions. When mandates of peacekeeping missions are under review and may change, it should also be mandatory for the Security Council to consult all troop and police contributing countries deployed to the mission. We commit to bring our own ideas and solutions to these consultations that can strengthen the implementation and protection of civilian mandates. Number 17, to urge the Security Council to ensure that mandates are matched with the requisite resources to commit to support a process that addresses the current critical resource gaps in several missions. We support a more phased mandating process that can ensure a better alignment of resources and mandates. Number 18, noting that any well-planned mandate implementation may be undermined by inefficient mobility, logistics, or support. To call for effective support of all military plans, including contingency plans, and to commit to work with the Secretariat to review the current support arrangements, including possible transfer of authority over more of the logistical capability to the military component where appropriate. Recommend that these principles be endorsed on a voluntary basis and that the signatories meet once each year to discuss how to further improve the implementation of the protection of civilians mandate in UN peacekeeping operations. So this is what they have laid out in writing, so that when they roll out the UN troops in America, that you will think that this is all for keeping the peace. They're here to save us from ISIS or from the Black Lives Matter thugs or whoever is the threat. And believe the American people will open in the UN troops with open arms, because the police just can't seem to get the job done. They're killing people and getting killed by people. And by it being UN troops, these won't be American troops. These will be people from other countries. These will be troops from other countries. And believe me, other countries don't necessarily care for American people. They look at American people as, snobby and exceptionalist and just have this high-minded mentality of selfishness, of being selfish. So, if the police are doing what they're doing and have been doing to our people all of these years, imagine having some troops come in who don't like America at all. And you think they're coming to bring peace? No, they're coming in to follow orders. And they may have some animosity and anger towards America and its people behind those orders. All right, so, this is where we're at. Hope the news that was brought out all connects together with, really what's going on with the agenda that they're pushing forward with right now. Like I always tell brothers and sisters, let's not get caught up in the confusion and in the chaos. Let's look to escape what's coming and try to help and save as many people along the way as we can. Because if you want to fight with the beast, you will get devoured by the beast. The scriptures tell us the beast devours everything in its path. You cannot fight against this system. That will be Christ's job when he comes back to take this system down. In the meantime, we gather the troops. We gather those together to get ready for the battle, for the ultimate battle. In the meantime, we have to operate like the disciples did. Wise as serpents, harmless as doves, going out amongst the wolves. All right, so that's it for segment 1. We're going to go ahead and get ready for segment 2. If you have a comment, a question, maybe some news you want to bring out that we didn't discuss tonight, I would love to hear from you, brothers and sisters. On this so-called day of rage and what's going on out there, for those who may see things going on in this city or things, recently that's been going on around them, it'd be great to hear you, chime in on all of that. So the guest calling number is 646-200-4309. You can press the number 1, and that'll put you in the call queue, and we'll take your calls when we come back. You are listening to Friday Night Sabbath, coming out of Babylon on Blog Talk Radio for the Gathering of Christ Church. Stay tuned.
Every day, my brother struggled just to wake up. Avoid the pain, take a substance just to stay afloat. Cause socially, economically, you find us on the bottom.